Echoes of the ancients, the Yazidi lifestyle and its Sumerian roots. Nestled in the mountains and plains of northern Iraq, the Yazidis live a life shaped by ancient tradition, spiritual symbolism, and a deep connection to nature, a way of life that echoes the rhythms of the long-lost Sumerian world. Like the Sumerians, the Yazidis practice a religion that venerates the forces of nature and cosmic balance. Their reverence for the sun, the moon, and the sacred elements reflects beliefs that once thrived in Mesopotamia, where gods were linked to stars, winds, and earth. The Yazidi New Year, celebrated in spring, mirrors the Sumerian practice of marking the rebirth of life with seasonal rituals. Yazidi sacred sites, especially the Holy Valley of Lolish, resemble ancient Sumerian temples, built not just as places of worship, but as bridges between the divine and the human. Their oral religious tradition, rich with hymns and sacred songs, also mirrors the Sumerians' use of chant and myth to preserve cosmic order. Even in daily life, the Yazidis reflect an ancient worldview, community-centered living, respect for caste-like spiritual roles, and rituals tied to agriculture and fertility. Though thousands of years apart, the lifestyles of the Yazidis and the Sumerians share a spiritual thread, a devotion to the eternal patterns of the natural world and the unseen forces that govern it. In the Yazidis, we glimpse a living memory of Mesopotamia, not in museums, but in the quiet resilience of a people who still carry the wisdom of the ancient earth. Let's get to know them closely.
The leaders of Sumerian city-states often addressed their people from a high place, such as the roof of a house or a platform. This elevated position symbolized authority and allowed them to be seen by a large crowd. It was common in many ancient civilizations for rulers to use such elevated platforms to ensure their presence was both physically and symbolically above the common people, reinforcing their power and status. The Sumerians, particularly during religious or ceremonial occasions, would sometimes collect branches, trees, or parts of trees as part of their rituals. One such ceremony was the Akitu festival, which was held to celebrate the new year and honor the gods. During this festival, participants, including elders and citizens, would engage in various activities, such as collecting bundles of reeds or branches to be used in symbolic rituals. These pieces of trees, especially palm branches or other vegetation, were often carried in processions and used in ceremonies to honor the gods, ensure fertility, or symbolize the rejuvenation of nature. The gathering and use of these tree parts were integral to the rituals, symbolizing life, growth, and divine favor. So, it wasn't uncommon for both elders and common people to take part in such ceremonial preparations. Religious hymns, prayers, and laments were sung to honor the gods and seek their favor. Laments, in particular, were often part of rituals to express sorrow or seek blessings, especially in times of agricultural uncertainty or natural hardship. These songs or laments could have been communal, with everyone participating as they gathered materials, reinforcing a sense of unity and collective purpose. Music and chants were deeply intertwined with the spiritual and social activities of the Sumerians, adding emotional depth and meaning to the rituals they performed. Ritual transfer and gifting. In some rituals, especially when installing a new priest, king, or official, it is possible that special necklaces or amulets were given to the individual as a symbol of their new sacred responsibility. The Sumerians did wear medallion-like ritual objects around the neck, especially during sacred ceremonies. These objects served to protect, honor, and connect them to the gods. Wearing a sacred object was both personal and communal, deeply tied to the spiritual and social life of Sumer.
رشد عرشد علي شمس شدروش لادا شمس يزدين كانوا شدروش لادا اجبري من لادا مالكي ميران كانوا شدزنا دول لادا
Before entering holy places, such as temples or ziggurats, the Sumerians did indeed perform various purification rituals, and they likely followed specific protocols regarding the doors and thresholds of sacred spaces. There were important symbolic practices related to entering sacred areas. Thresholds and doors as sacred boundaries. The threshold of a sacred space, including doors, often symbolized a boundary between the human and divine realms. In many ancient cultures, including Sumerian, the threshold represented a transition from the profane to the sacred. They did treat thresholds with reverence, and stepping over them symbolized entering into the presence of the gods. Doorways as sacred symbols. In some Sumerian rituals, the doors of temples or shrines were considered significant and could have been decorated with religious symbols or inscriptions. These doors were not just physical barriers, but also spiritual ones, representing the gate between the earthly and divine realms. As such, rituals surrounding these doors would involve showing respect, perhaps through gestures like bowing or offering prayers as they cross the threshold. In summary, the rituals surrounding entering holy spaces involved purification, reverence, and awareness of the symbolic significance of doorways as thresholds between the human and divine realms.
شيخاتي وشيخاتنا بحرواني مظن شمتنا في تمرة مركب لديجنا دلبواني منا شوان وزيقنا لدقر نفسوان ديجنا عزيزنا في تمرة شخصيات خفضاش هلا قرب مرجع لا بينا شيشباش
Religious offerings. the Sumerian priests and religious leaders, including elders, often received offerings as part of their duties in serving the gods. These offerings could include food, drink, incense, and valuable items, which were presented in temples or during religious ceremonies. People would offer these items to the gods and the elders as intermediaries between the gods and the people, would receive these gifts as part of their role. Donations and offerings in temples. In Yazidi holy places, especially at major sites like Lalish, the holiest Yazidi temple, pilgrims often bring offerings. These offerings can include money, food, or oil for sacred lamps, cloth for sacred areas. Pilgrims may leave money donations at shrines or near sacred objects, especially as part of vows nida, meaning they promise something to God in return for blessings or protection. The Sumerians did crush certain materials with their feet, especially as part of agricultural and ritual practices. The most prominent example is grapes for wine-making foot pressing. Crushing grapes with feet to extract juice for wine or fermentation was a well-documented practice in the ancient Near East, including Mesopotamia. Clay and mud for construction or bricks. Workers would stomp in pits of mud, mixing water, clay, and straw with their feet to make bricks for buildings. This was a common labor activity, especially for temple construction or irrigation projects. Not symbolic, but essential for building ziggurats, temples, and canals. Some ritual grains or seeds. In temple rituals or seasonal festivals, symbolic grinding or crushing of grain might occur. While grinding was usually done with stones, trampling grains as part of threshing or ritual purification could be symbolic. The harvest cycle was sacred. The act of crushing or threshing with feet or tools had ritual meaning, tied to the god Dumuzi, Tammuz, and fertility myths. There is evidence suggesting that the Sumerians performed ritual dances that included holding plants, branches, or floral items in their hands, especially during religious ceremonies or festivals. Evidence from Sumerian art and texts, votive art and cylinder seals. Sumerian cylinder seals and reliefs often depict processions or dances with participants holding what appear to be palm fronds, date clusters, or other vegetal symbols. These objects were likely symbols of fertility, renewal, or offerings to the gods. Rituals in temples. Many rituals in honor of gods, like in Ana Ishtar, Dumuzi, or Enlil, included dance, music, and offerings involving plants, grain, or flowers. Hymns to Inanna sometimes describe celebrants engaging in joyful movement or dancing as part of sacred rites that may involve vegetation linked to agricultural cycles. The sacred marriage rite. This major ritual involves symbolic acts of fertility between a king as Dumuzi and the high priestess as Inanna. These ceremonies were rich in symbols of vegetation and may have included dancing with plants or garlands as part of invoking abundance. Types of plants likely used: palm fronds, date clusters, reeds, barley or wheat sheaves, sacred trees or branches. The Sumerians, like many ancient cultures, played musical instruments around a fire, especially during social, religious, or ceremonial events. Music and fire were both central elements in Sumerian life, and combining them in rituals or gatherings would have been a natural part of their culture. Musical instruments. The Sumerians played a variety of musical instruments, many of which are depicted in ancient artwork. These included stringed instruments, like the lyre and harp, percussion instruments, such as drums, and wind instruments, like flutes. These instruments were used in both private and public settings, and during religious ceremonies, festivals, and community gatherings. The Sumerians had a deep understanding and reverence for the stars, moon, and sun, and these celestial bodies played a central role in their religion, mythology, and symbolism.
The Yazidis also deeply revere the sun, moon, and stars, incorporating them into their religious beliefs and symbolism, much like the ancient Sumerians. Here's how these celestial elements are represented in Yazidi tradition.
Sumerians did not have prophets in the way that later religions like Judaism, Christianity, or Islam describe prophets. Here's how it worked for them. Communication with gods. In Sumerian religion, communication with the gods was handled mainly by priests, kings, and sometimes priestesses. These people performed rituals, sacrifices, prayers, and interpreted omens, but they didn't claim to be speaking on behalf of the gods in a prophetic sense, like, God says you must do this. Dreams and omens. The Sumerians believed that God sent messages through dreams, signs in the sky, or natural events. Specialists like diviners called Bari priests would interpret these signs. So, while they tried to understand the will of the gods, they didn't have someone called a prophet who stood up and spoke divine revelations to the people. The Sumerians believed gods communicated with humans, but mostly through dreams, omens, and rituals. They did not have prophets in the later religious sense. No public figures whose job was to deliver divine messages to the people. Yazidism is a very ancient, pre-Abrahamic religion. It is older than the idea of prophets, as understood in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yazidis preserve an ancient worldview, where God does not need prophets to communicate with humanity. Their belief is that God created the world perfectly. Therefore, no further correction by prophets is necessary. God entrusted the world to Tolsk-Melech, the peacock angel, who acts as God's representative on earth. God's communication is direct and spiritual. Yazidis believe every human can feel God's will through nature, life, and inner conscience, not through written revelations or prophets. In Yazidi belief, God can contact Yazidis through dreams. Dreams are seen as an important spiritual channel where the divine, angels, especially Tolsk-Melech, or holy beings can send messages, warnings, encouragement, or guidance. In Sumerian religion, there was a concept of the seven gods who decree fate Anunnaki, or sometimes called Eg in Akkadian texts. These were powerful gods who decided the fate of the world and kings. Examples include An Sky God, Enlil Air God, Enki Water and Wisdom God, Ninhursag Earth Goddess, and others. The number 7 was sacred. The number 7 was extremely important to the Sumerians. It symbolized completion, power, and divine order. Yazidis also believe in 7 holy beings, and this idea is very similar to the ancient Sumerian tradition. Yazidi belief in 7 angels. In Yazidism, after God created the world, he appointed 7 great angels Hefsar in Kurdish to take care of creation and the world. Tolsk-Melech is the main angel whom Yazidis focus on. These 7 angels help govern the earth, nature, life, and human fate. Very similar to the ancient Mesopotamian idea of divine beings controlling the world. Now let's compare them together. Sumerian tradition: 7 divine powers, 7 sages, 7 demons, rule nature, fate, the underworld. Leader gods like Enlil, Enki, sacredness of 7 very sacred. Yazidi tradition: 7 holy angels, rule creation, guide humanity. Leader, Tolsk-Melech, sacredness of 7. Yazidis have a very ancient belief in 7 angels, which is very close to the Sumerian idea of 7 divine beings governing the world.
What colors are sacred to the Sumerians?
In Sumerian culture, colors held significant symbolic meaning and were often associated with various deities, sacred objects, and the forces of nature. Temples dedicated to Sumerian gods often featured walls and floors decorated with vibrant blue and red tiles or mosaics. For the Yazidis, the color blue is traditionally considered taboo or forbidden, rather than important in a positive sense. Historically, blue was avoided in religious or cultural contexts because it was associated with spiritual power, and some believed it could ward off or interfere with divine beings. Elders and important figures in Sumerian society often used objects like walking sticks or staffs, but they were not just for physical support. In Sumerian culture, a staff or rod was a major symbol of authority, leadership, and divine right, especially among rulers, priests, and judges. Kings, high officials, and elders were often depicted holding a staff, rod, or scepter. The staff was a symbol of rule, justice, and guidance, similar to how a shepherd guides his flock. For instance, in many royal reliefs and cylinder seals, rulers are shown holding a long rod called in Sumerian jippa, or ipar, or a crook, sometimes paired with a measuring line, symbolizing their power to maintain order and enforce divine law. The Sumerians used water in a sacred, ritualistic way comparable to holy water in later religious traditions. It was central to purification, divine offerings, and temple worship, and held cosmic meaning through the Apsu. It's possible that the Sumerians had a type of wish tree, similar symbolic tree, that played a role in their religious and ceremonial practices. While there isn't direct evidence of a single wish tree tradition, trees and plants were indeed highly symbolic in Sumerian culture, and they were often used in rituals to invoke divine favor, prosperity, or good fortune. And many ancient cultures, including Sumer, trees were seen as sacred and were associated with life, growth, and the divine. The palm tree, for instance, was a symbol of fertility and abundance in Sumerian society. During festivals like the Akitu, people might have placed wishes or offerings near trees or plants as part of the rituals to seek blessings for a good harvest, health, or prosperity in the coming year. The Sumerians definitely danced. Dance was a big part of their religious ceremonies, festivals, and daily life. Here's what we know about Sumerian dance, religious and ritual dancing. Dance was often part of temple rituals to honor gods like Inanna, Enlil, and Dumuzi. Priests, priestesses, and temple musicians would perform sacred dances, sometimes to music from lyres, drums, and flutes. Festival dancing. Big public festivals, like the Akitu New Year Festival, included group dances. These were probably circle dances, with people moving rhythmically together, celebrating renewal and divine blessings. Snakes, including black snakes, definitely had a role in Sumerian religion and mythology, but it's a little complicated. In Sumerian culture, snakes were important magical and religious symbols. They were connected to both life and death, healing and danger, like a dual symbol. Some gods and creatures had snake forms or were associated with snakes.
Prophet Noah demanded from the black snake to put itself in the hole in order not to sink. Till now, these people cannot kill the black snake because it saved the humanity and make it to be continued. There is a similarity between the Bible, the Quran, and our books that is described that there is a similarity between these stories.
According to Yazidi tradition, Noah's Ark did land on Mount Sinjar, not Mount Ararat. As in other traditions, they have a unique tradition in post-flood repopulation. Some Yazidi accounts say Noah's son spilled his seed outside of marriage, and the Yazidis are descended from Noah's other son, or sometimes a figure named Nami, or Na. In Yazidi oral tradition, the flood serves more as a symbolic renewal than a punishment for sin, and their version often emphasizes the continuity of their own lineage from the survivors of the flood.